All right, fuck me. The queen finally kicks the bucket and the entire world goes batshit crazy. I mean, for real. Blanket coverage of a funeral. You'd swear the goddamn apocalypse was upon us. But what's truly wild is the sheer amount of detail that went into planning this whole shebang.
It's insane. Right?
Absolutely insane. We've got an expert here who's going to unpack it all for us, break it down the whole 9 yards.
Well, the level of planning was, meticulous, I guess that's the word. And what's even wilder, they actually had 2 separate master plans.
2?
Yep. Operation London Bridge for if she died in England, and Operation Unicorn for if she died in Scotland.
Hold up. Operation Unicorn?
Huh.
Seriously?
Serious. Guess which plan they ended up using?
Let me think. She croaked at Balmoral. Right. It's a unicorn.
Bingo. Scotland threw a wrench in the works, brought a whole other set of traditions and protocols into play.
2 plans for 1 funeral. Fuck me. These royals are next level extra.
It does seem a bit over the top, right?
A bit. It's full-blown bonkers. But I guess logistically it makes sense. 2 countries, 2 sets of rules, 2 funerals, whatever.
Precisely. Death in Scotland changes the game completely. And speaking of changes, get this, the Queen's coffin was made 30 years before she actually died.
30 years? What the hell? Were they just sitting on that thing waiting for her to kick the bucket?
Not quite waiting, but yeah, it's not that uncommon for important figures to have their coffins prepared in advance. Morbid pre-planning.
Morbid. That's an understatement. It's straight up creepy.
It is a bit eerie when you think about it, but it's a testament to how seriously they take these matters. Every detail is meticulously planned.
I'll say oak, lead lining, the whole shebang. It must weigh a ton.
Oh, it did. Incredibly heavy and durable. Fit for a queen, as they say.
All right, so the coffin's ready. The queen's dead in Scotland. What happens next? Did they slap her on a Ryanair flight back to London?
Actually, no. They drove her back to England in a hearse.
A hearse? You're shitting me. No private jet for the dearly departed queen.
No, a hearse. It was a strategic move, actually. It allowed people to line the streets and pay their respects as she journeyed back.
A bit morbid, don't you think? Parading a corpse across the country.
Some might say so, but it was also a powerful symbol of the Queen's connection to her people.
Okay, that's kind of touching, I guess. So the Queen's body is back in England. What's next on the funeral agenda? Did the Scottish get to do their weird shit first?
Absolutely. Before the big shebang in London, there were specific Scottish rituals. The procession up the Royal Mile to St. Giles's Cathedral was quite a spectacle.
Yeah, all that history. Bagpipes, kilts, the whole 9 yards, right?
Plenty of kilts, for sure. But there was also a very significant moment during the Vigil of the Princes at St. Giles's. Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, participated.
Princess Anne? Really?
Yep. She became the first woman ever to take part in the vigil.
That's our Anne. Breaking royal balls since forever, always knew she was the badass of the family.
It was a powerful statement, for sure. A sign of the times, perhaps.
Times are a-changing, all right. So Scottish rituals out of the way, what next? On to the big show in London.
Right. Next came the lying in state in London. You know, the big one.
Ah, yes. Q-mageddon. Thousands of people going completely mental, waiting in line for hours on end just to shuffle past a coffin. The British public, eh? Gotta love them.
An estimated 250,000 people queued, to be exact.
Jesus Christ. 250,000.
Yeah. The security was, well, insane, as you can imagine. They even had to tackle some bloke who tried to rush the coffin.
What a moron. What did he think he was going to do? Steal the crown jewels?
Your guess is as good as mine. Some people just can't handle a bit of decorum, I suppose.
Decorum. More like a death fetish, I reckon.
Maybe. But speaking of the crown jewels, they were on full display during the lying in state. The imperial state crown, the orb, the scepter, the whole shebang.
Of course, got to go all out for a queen, right?
Right. And here's a detail most people don't know. It wasn't just regular guards watching over the coffin. Even the service chiefs, the top brass, took turns standing guard.
Damn, that's dedication.
It certainly is. Shows you how seriously they took this whole affair.
All right, so we've got Scottish rituals, public freakouts over the lying in state. What's next? The main event. The actual funeral.
You got it. And this wasn't just any funeral. This was a global gathering of epic proportions, something we haven't seen in decades.
World leaders, celebrities, the whole 9 yards. Must have been a logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. A massive, massive undertaking. They even banned private jets to try and keep things manageable.
No private jets.
Yeah.
You're telling me Putin had to fly commercial?
Well, There were a few exceptions, of course. Biden got special treatment, for example, and the Chinese VP. But for the most part, it was a surprisingly level playing field, at least in terms of transport.
Okay, but how the hell did they pull off this massive funeral without it all going tits up?
Timing was key. They cleverly scheduled the funeral to coincide with the UN General Assembly, which was already happening in New York.
Smart move. Two birds, one stone. Efficient and economical. So tell me, was the funeral all doom and gloom, or did they manage to spice things up a bit?
They put on a show, let me tell you. Military Precision was the name of the game. Like a perfectly choreographed ballet of soldiers, music, tradition, the whole shebang.
Don't tell me they had a marching band, too.
Multiple marching bands, actually. And they marched at a precise pace of 75 steps per minute.
75 steps per minute. Bloody hell, those guys must have been training for months.
I'd imagine so. They take these things very seriously.
I bet they do. And the music, was it at least decent, or all just funeral dirges?
The music was impressive, actually. They featured marches by composers like Johann Heinrich Walch.
Walch? Never heard of him.
Oh, he's a big deal in the marching band world. They also played some Mendelssohn.
Mendelssohn, okay, I know that one.
And Chopin, even.
Chopin. At a funeral, that's a new one.
They mixed it up a bit. Not your typical funeral playlist, that's for sure.
All right, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Now, what about those cannons I saw firing off? Was that just for dramatic effect?
Those were minute guns, fired as a mark of respect. Tradition going back centuries. And speaking of tradition, there were a lot of symbolic elements woven into the procession. For example, King Charles placed the Queen's Company camp color on her coffin.
Hold up. The Queen's what now?
The Queen's Company camp color.
Sounds like some deep royal shit I don't understand.
It is. It's a symbol of her personal relationship with the Grenadier Guards, her regiment.
Grenadier Guards.
Yeah. By placing it on her coffin, Charles was acknowledging her close connection to the military and her role as their sovereign. You know, passing the torch, so to speak.
Okay, that's actually kind of badass. So the coffin finally makes it to Windsor. What happens next? Do they just chuck her in a hole and call it a day?
Not quite chucking her in a hole. Things get a bit more intimate at Windsor. The committal service at St. George's Chapel, it was a smaller affair. Only about 800 guests compared to the 2,000 at Westminster Abbey.
800 people. That's still a shit ton of people for a small service. Were they serving canapes at least?
Probably. But the real focus there was the royal household staff, the folks who worked closely with the Queen. It was a pretty symbolic service, though, especially the moment the Lord Chamberlain, he broke his wand of office over her coffin.
Wait, hold up. He broke his what now? Is this some kind of kinky royal sex ritual I haven't heard about?
Not quite. It signifies the end of an era. See, the Lord Chamberlain is the top dog in the royal household, and his wand represents his authority. Breaking it, it's like he's saying goodbye to the Queen, but also, you know, letting go of his own power, symbolizing the transfer to King Charles.
Damn, that's some deep shit. Almost makes me wish I'd actually watched this funeral instead of getting blackout drunk and pretending it wasn't happening. But hey, you live and learn, right? So after all that pomp and circumstance, did they finally bury the old bird?
They did. She was interred in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Private ceremony, just the family.
Finally some privacy for the Queen. No cameras, no crowds, just peace and quiet. Where exactly is she buried? Did they stick her next to that creepy royal vault?
Nah, she's buried alongside her parents, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, and the ashes of her sister, Princess Margaret. And get this, they moved Prince Philip's remains from the royal vault so he could be buried next to his wife.
Oh, that's actually kind of sweet. Reunited in death and all that. Who would have thought old Phil was such a romantic?
A touching end to their love story, for sure. But hey, let's backtrack for a second. Remember all that insane security for the funeral?
Yeah, something about 10,000 cops on duty every day. It was like London was suddenly hosting the Olympics of Death or something.
Exactly. Biggest security operation in UK history. They even had a special unit monitoring folks with potentially dangerous obsessions with the royal family. Talk about a funeral buzzkill, right?
Obsessed fans at a funeral. That's some next level creepy shit. But I guess when you're dealing with the Queen, you got to expect the unexpected. Speaking of unexpected, how much did this whole royal circus end up costing?
Get this, about £162 million.
Holy shit. That's enough to buy a private island and a lifetime supply of booze. They could have built a hospital or something with that kind of money.
It's a hefty price tag, no doubt. Raises questions about the value of all that pomp and circumstance. But millions of people lined the streets and billions watched on TV. It resonated with a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, I suppose a shared experience like that is priceless. Plus, all those tourists flocking to London for the funeral probably gave the economy a nice little boost. It's like death tourism or something.
Morbid, but true. The funeral was a definite boon for the UK economy. But you want to know something crazy? The Queen's funeral wasn't even the most watched television broadcast in the UK this century.
What? Seriously? What could possibly beat out the Queen's funeral? A royal baby being born?
Nope. Remember back in 2020 when Boris Johnson announced that COVID-19 lockdown?
Don't remind me. That was the year I ran out of toilet paper insanity.
Well, his lockdown announcement actually drew a larger average audience than the Queen's funeral.
I guess even the Queen can't compete with a global pandemic.
Apparently not. But her funeral was still one of the most watched events in British history, mind you. 26.5 million viewers across more than 50 channels.
Damn, that's still a shit ton of eyeballs glued to the telly. What about the global audience?
An estimated 4 billion people worldwide watched the funeral or had access to it.
4 billion? That's like half the planet.
Truly a global phenomenon. But let's get back to some of those finer details. Remember that committal service at St. George's Chapel, packed with hidden meanings and symbolism?
Lay it on me. After all that talk about wands and coffins, I'm ready for anything.
Well, they included the Russian Kontakion of the departed in the music selection.
Hold up. The Russian... What? Why the hell would they play Russian music at the Queen's funeral? Is this some kind of Cold War mind game?
It's quite touching, actually. They also played it at Prince Philip's funeral. It was a subtle nod to their shared history, you know? And maybe even a gesture of unity, what with all the global tension and all.
Interesting. So even in death, the Queen was playing diplomatic games. Clever bitch.
And then there's the symbolism of the Lord Chamberlain breaking his wand. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, end of an era, new beginnings, all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else I should know?
Well, the wand itself is made of white staff, represents purity and authority. So, breaking it, it's not just the Lord Chamberlain saying goodbye to the Queen, but also relinquishing his authority, you know? Symbolizing the transfer of power to King Charles.
Okay, I'm getting a headache from all this symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on before I need a stiff drink.
All right. But we can't forget about the flags. Did you notice that the Queen's coffin was draped with the royal standard?
Yeah, I think I remember seeing some fancy flag on that thing. What's the big deal?
The royal standard, it's not just any flag. It represents the sovereign in the United Kingdom. And get this, when they moved her coffin from Scotland to England, they actually replaced the Scottish version of the royal standard with the one used in the rest of the UK.
Seriously, different flags for different countries. These royals are obsessed with rules and protocol.
It's all about tradition and symbolism, mate. Every detail, no matter how small, it's meticulously planned and executed.
I'm starting to think we need a whole other episode just to cover all the hidden meanings in this funeral. There's just too much to unpack.
I agree. We've only scratched the surface.
All right, let's take a break. My brain is fried from all this royal funeral talk. We'll be back soon with more juicy details about the Queen's farewell, including some truly wild reactions from around the world. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back and ready to dig into some of the more, shall we say, colorful reactions to the Queen's death. Because, let's be real, not everyone was sobbing into their teacups and queuing up for hours to gawk at a coffin.
You got that right. The reactions were a mixed bag, as diverse as the countries themselves. Some went all out with tributes and commemorations, you know.
Right.
Like Australia. They illuminated the Sydney Opera House with a giant image of the Queen. Yeah, and even declared a national day of mourning. The Aussies, they loved their Queen.
They did. Makes you wonder if they'll ever ditch the monarchy and go full republic, eh?
It's a hot topic down under, that's for sure. But not everyone was so keen on mourning the Queen, mind you.
No.
Yeah, in some parts of the world, her death sparked protests and calls to abolish the monarchy altogether.
Seriously? Protesting a dead lady's funeral? That seems a bit harsh, even for the anti-monarchy crowd.
It's more complicated than that. For many former British colonies, the Queen's death brought up a lot of, well, baggage.
Baggage.
Yeah, painful memories of colonialism and oppression, you know. For them, the monarchy, it represents this whole system of power and privilege that they want no part of.
I get it. But still, it's not like the Queen personally colonized these countries. She was just a figurehead.
True. But symbols hold a lot of power, mate. And for some, the monarchy is a symbol of a past they'd rather forget. But hey, let's lighten things up a bit.
Yeah, all right. Enough doom and gloom. Did anyone actually do something nice for the Queen? Besides, spending millions on a fancy funeral?
There were some really touching gestures, actually. In Kenya, the former staff members of the Treetops Hotel, they gathered to light candles and share their memories of the Queen.
Treetops Hotel. Why that place?
Well, it's where she learned of her father's death and became queen. It was a special place for her, you know?
That's actually pretty sweet. Like, they were remembering her as a person, not just a monarch.
Exactly. And in Malta, people laid flowers outside Villa Gardamangia.
Villa what now?
Gardamangia. It's where the Queen lived with Prince Philip after they were married. They even started a petition to erect a statue in her honor.
Oh, that's cute. They really loved her in Malta. It's these little stories, that make you realize the Queen wasn't just some distant figurehead. She actually touched people's lives.
No doubt about it. And I think that's what made her death so significant for so many people. It wasn't just the end of an era. It was the loss of someone who, for better or worse, had been a constant presence in their lives for decades.
Well said. So, we've covered the plans, the processions, the security, the costs, the global viewership, the symbolism, even the interesting reactions. Safe to say we've dissected every last detail of the Queen's farewell.
I reckon we've done a pretty thorough job, mate. And learned a thing or two along the way.
Yeah, like how to plan a kick-ass funeral, even if you're not royalty.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, what does it all mean? What's the takeaway from all this?
I think the Queen's death and all the extraordinary events that followed, they remind us that even in a world that's constantly changing, tradition and ritual, they still hold a lot of power. They bring people together, spark conversations, and yeah, even cause a bit of controversy. But above all, they allow us to, mark these important moments in our lives.
Deep, man, deep. So for all you listeners out there still curious about the Queen and her epic send-off, there's a whole world of information out there just waiting to be explored. Go forth and do your research.
And remember, even in death, a queen can still teach us a thing or two.
And on that note, we'll bid you farewell. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Queen's final curtain call. Until next time, happy diving.